Michael is going to honor us tonight with doing a great presentation on Australia radio scanning. So without further ado, I'm handing the net over to Michael, VK5ZEA Michael, for your educational presentation, and have fun. If you could just spend a moment, Michael, and check with Rick, KC2ESD. Rick would like to record this educational presentation for YouTube. So you could just spend a moment and give a voice call to Rick, KC2ESD, and he'll coordinate that, and we'll get that started. So, Michael, I give you the net. VK5ZEA for educational presentation. Have fun with it. WX480X.
Okay, Joe. I should be right to go. Got 2 charged handhelds and a spare battery as well, so it should be fine. So I just want to check with Rick. Are you ready to go? I'll wait for your go signal, and then I'll see what happens. All I can see is lights, camera, action. You're on. And 5, 4, 3, 2. Well, very good. Yes, my name is Michael, and my call is VK5ZEA. I'm from a small city called Port Lincoln in South Australia, and I've been involved with amateur radio for 20 years, and radio scanning for just a little bit more than that. And I first got involved with scanning, got started with scanning when I started working at a local retail, electronics retail store. And they were a dealer for Tandy Electronics, for Radio Shack equipment. And one of the things they had on the shelf was a radio scanner. And being the good new employee, I thought, hey, I want to find out how this thing works. So I asked if I could take it home and play with it so I could better sell it. So I did. I took it home, and I rang up a friend who had a radio scanner, and we exchanged some ideas, and he gave me some frequencies to listen to. But back in those days, there wasn't really a lot of wide area networking or even repeaters. Most of it was simplex. So punched in my local police and the ambulance and the fire brigade and things like that, and listened. And it was good, and that really got me going with radio scanning. Now, what I will do is just mention with radio scanning in Australia, with listening to radio in general, there are very few rules. We can listen to anything we want to. There's no real restrictions apart from anything that contains a telephone call, be it the old analog phone system, which is now no longer, or cordless telephones, or even back in the day, HF, red phones, when they had telephone calls going over HF, you're not allowed to listen to them. And even it would extend to amateur radio people or other people doing phone patch calls. Anything with a phone call, not allowed to listen. That's a no-no. Anything else is fine. Although there are some sort of rules about profiting from what you hear because of other people's conversations, but that never really comes up, I don't think. So in South Australia, where I am, we have quite a few government agencies that use radio systems, and back in the day, a lot of them had simplex frequencies, just car to car, car to base, and that was that. So what I'll do is I'll have a quick pause. I don't want to time out the timer, and then I'll come back straight away. This is VK5ZEA, just pausing for a second. And VK5ZEA returning. We're talking about the early 90s, and in Australia, specifically in my regional area, like I said, I'm a large regional city, small city, 15,000 people. Large or small can be relative. And a lot of the government agencies had landline remote base. They'd have a transceiver up on a hill with a 2-wire telephone line going back to their office or their headquarters, and that's how they operate a radio. And that was the way with the police. The ambulance system had a fairly extensive network of landline-controlled radio bases, and there were certain regions that they simulcast, transmitted, and received all over a whole region. The fisheries department, we have a large coastline, an extensive coastline here, and the fisheries department would monitor people who are out fishing and commercial recreational fishing, and they had a very extensive interlinked repeater system. Oh, see Joe King up there. Maybe I've dropped down. I better just stand by. WX480X, VK5ZA. Am I still coming through, Joe? Well, I'm not sure. I haven't just saw Joe Key up on the D Plus log page, so hopefully I'm making it through. Yeah, the Fisheries Department, they had a statewide interlinked repeater system, and it was all done via dedicated UHF links, and it would go from state border to state border across the entire coastline and up into the main river we have here, the Murray River. And it was a fairly extensive system, a lot of latency. When you key up at one end of the state, it could be 5 seconds before all the other transmitters would key up. And none of the systems would talk to each other. None of the government agencies could really talk to each other. There was plans for a common emergency frequency, which I think was 163.99 megahertz, if I recall correctly. And every VHF radio on any government department, you would find that. And it tended to be on channel 40. That was going to be the common channel. In times of disaster or emergency, everyone would go to channel 40 and they'd be able to talk to each other. But that never really worked very well, because once they changed channel, they'd lose comms with their own people. And that was a bit of a nightmare. It didn't really work very well. So the government in South Australia decided we need a better system for this. And they investigated and contracted Motorola to build a smart zone trunk radio system, which is in the low 400 megs, where it's about 410 to 416, 418 megs, just below the amateur radio frequencies. And we now have a government radio network, they call it, which consists of many, many dozen interlinked Smart Zone 2 trunk radio bases. And I think 98% of them are all linked with either microwave links or dedicated radio links, apart from a couple which are up in the far north of the state. South Australia has a lot of area where there is just nothing. There's just no one there. There's a large ex-military base which is used for rocket launches, and we had the British doing nuclear bomb tests here in the 50s. There's a lot of empty space out there, and there's some very distant communities where the only way to get radio there was via satellite. It's now done via a fibre optic cable, but back in the day, satellite was the way to go. I'll just break for a second. This is VK5ZA. VK5ZA returning. So what we have now, we've got a situation where we have virtually all of the populated areas of the state are covered with the government radio network, and the majority of the traffic is for government agencies, be it the police or the South Australian Ambulance Service, the Metropolitan Fire Service, who cover fire calls in metropolitan areas, the Country Fire Service, who go out and fight the wildfires out in the farming areas, and the Fisheries Department, they have all moved over there. The prison system, the waterworks, the South Australian Water, all use the government radio network. The majority of traffic which is sensitive, be it the police or fisheries, or even the transport people who look after transport on the roads, that's all digital and encrypted. And it was a very, very sad day, I can tell you, when they cut over to the old system, because there was many a fun Friday and Saturday night sitting by the scanner listening to what was going on, especially in a small town like Port Lincoln, where you quite often would hear names on the radio scanner that you knew who they were, so it was always a good fun. So that's no longer. Now, I've said to Joey before, I mentioned on the net once before, the only real way to listen to the police is to wait till you see a police car drive past and throw a rock through the window, and when you're in the back seat being hauled to the police station, well, you can listen to the police radio as much as you like. But I kid, don't do it, kids. I don't condone that activity at all. And the other thing which is really, really interesting, which has happened just in the last few years, and it's to do with South Australia's extensive coastline and our fishing industry and recreational fishing, is that they have piggybacked another system onto the government radio system network, the backbone which links all the sites together. And I think there's 14 base stations along the coast have had a VHF channel 16 and 67 VHF VHF Marine radio system installed, which is linked back through the microwave backbone back to a central location. So now we have a marine safety network as well, which means that anyone can call on their VHF Marine Offer Distress channel, channel 16, no matter where they are, anywhere in the South Australian coastal waters, and get an emergency response. And that's just been launched this last month. It's been trialling for about 6 months, and that works really, really good. And being involved with marine electronics as I am as a profession, I work on fishing boats. Oh, I'm timing out a bit. Let go for a second. And I'm seeing some D-Rats people keying up there as well. I'm involved with marine electronics. That's my profession. When you see the shows like Deadliest Catch and Lobstermen, and you see the electronics in the wheelhouse of the fishing boats, that's the sort of work thing I fix up. That's what I do. I work on marine electronics, the radars, sonars, echo sounders, satellite communications, radio systems. So my background with radio is tied very intimately with the marine industry. So my interest with radio and the marine safety is always an interest as well. Because that's one of the big things we have here is a lot of fishing boats. So I think we have more fishing boat movements out of our harbour here than anywhere else in Australia. So there's always something to listen to on the VHF Marine. And now, quite more often with the AIS system, and I'm not sure how many are familiar with AIS, which is sort of like the APRS system for amateur radio, but for shipping, for commercial and fishing vessels, where they continually will transmit a position for other ships to know where they are, and ships have displays which can decode this information, and you can see where the ships are. And that's also able to be decoded and displayed on maps for scanner enthusiasts. That's another thing which I do here as well, is actually I decode the AIS traffic and look at it on a map. So it's not actually voice traffic, but I'm decoding the data, and I can see it on the screen here as well. As far as other trunk networks, in the metropolitan areas of Australia, there are several private trunk networks, and I don't really have access to those here. I'm as the crow flies, I'm around 250 kilometres from the capital city of South Australia, which is Adelaide, and quite often we do get RF traffic, radio traffic, across the water. We are separated by 2 gulfs, so quite often we will receive VHF and UHF traffic remotely over that distance, but I've never really got into trunk radio systems apart from the government radio network. My scanners, well, I do listen to the government radio network, so I do have a couple of trunk scanners. I've got a Uniden 780 XLT, which usually spends most of its time at work, and I think it's a UBCT8, which is an older, very basic trunk tracking scanner. I haven't seen one of the Uniden home patrols yet. As long as they can be programmed manually, I can't see why they couldn't be used here. Of course, there's no good putting in a South Australian postal code because the home patrol software doesn't know what to do with that. And I'm timing out again. DK5ZEA. And VK5ZEA returning. Got to remember that 3-minute timeout. That's a killer. My other radio scanners I have here, I'm looking on my bench here in the Radio Shack. I do have a couple of realistic conventional scanners, the good old AM/FM multi-channel scanning receivers. My first ever bench scanner was a Realistic Pro 2004, and I still have that, and it still works pretty well. I use that for decoding the AIS data from the shipping, and I also have a Pro 2006, which is a slightly updated version of that radio scanner in a slightly different form factor. Operates essentially identically. The other interesting radio scanning that I have done is decoding or listening to, once again, I wasn't supposed to, and hopefully not be too many people upset with this, is back in the day when the Inmarsat A system, the satellite system used for shipping, the Inmarsat A system was in a lot more common use. I did play with a down converter, which I put in the audition aimed at one of the Inmarsat satellites, and I was able to listen to radio telephone calls through the Inmarsat A system, and that was that was back in, I think, the mid-90s I did that. I don't think that's very readily available to be done anymore. I think that everything's gone digital traffic on the satellite system. So I think what I'll do now is I'll just hand it back to Joe, WX4ADX, to see if he's got any questions he might want to pose about the radio scanning in Australia, and specifically my area possibly, and we'll go from there. So back to you, Joe, WX4ADX, VK5ZEA.
Okay, Michael, how do you copy me at this time?